Hi everybody, welcome back. This is our third video cast for this unit on motivation and emotion, and we're finally going to get to the emotion part. We're casting aside motivation for now and talking about emotion. So what is an emotion? It's a four-part process. You have physiological arousal, which is the physical part. Sweating, crying, shallow breath, increased heart rate, all of those things. Then you have cognitive interpretation of the emotion. Um, you're interpreting the event and the feelings, both unconsciously and consciously, trying to determine how you feel about this. Then you have subjective feelings. You link this event and this emotion to memories of previous situations and previous emotions, and using that, you decide how you feel about it. And then finally, you have the behavioral expression. You act on it, right? Either it's funny, so you smile, or it's sad, so you cry, or you run because it's dangerous. So what is the point of having an emotion? There are a couple of different things here, but I think the key part is communication, right? Communicating with other human beings, communicating with other organisms is important. Some mammals can recognize our facial expressions and emotions. Dogs, right? Really good at that. Then another point is to help you decide a course of action, right? That emotion is going to help you decide what you should do next. If you're feeling fear, you're either going to fight or you're going to flee. Most likely you're gonna run, right? The interesting thing about emotion is that it's not entirely genetic, but it's also not entirely environmental. They really share this process. Um, we have a universal set of emotions, but actually each individual has a unique emotional response and intensity of response in that emotion. So there's a good question here about whether or not this is cultural, right? Girls are allowed to express their emotions more than boys in our culture. Whether or not this is gender, the fact that I have estrogen flowing through my system, does that make me more emotional in some way, or is it really a cultural question? And then then there's the genetic question: is my family more likely to be emotional than yours? Let's look at the biology of your emotions first. We've got our limbic system. This is really where things happen. Remember, it's that um, smaller brain, midbrain area, and this is your fight or flight response. Your limbic system really decides through the use of the hippocampus, the amygdala, reticular formation, the motor cortex, right, whether or not you should fight off the danger or you should fight it. So let's take a look at what some of these do. Your amygdala, it looks for threats, especially in facial expression. So somebody who has a damaged amygdala has a hard time reading facial expressions. Remember, we've talked about that before. And so if this is damaged, you might have a hard time understanding whether or not that bear is trying to attack you. Your reticular formation, this kind of sounds the alarm in your brain and gets all your systems ready to go. So this arouses your body. Your motor cortex allows for the reaction, right, through voluntary and involuntary movements. And that seems odd, but it actually isn't. Like, smiling is both voluntary and involuntary. A voluntary smile is when you pose for the camera, right? An involuntary one is when something's truly funny and you really can't help it but smile. So smiling can be both. So even minor expressions, if you're thinking that all I'm thinking about here is whether or not you should run from that bear, it's not true. Even your minor expressions like smiling can both be voluntary and involuntary, depending on how natural you feel, how comfortable you feel being yourself in the environment, that sort of thing. And then the last thing I want to mention about the biology of your emotions is that this word called lateralization, it means that it's happening on one side and not on the other. So each hemisphere deals with different emotions. Your right hemisphere deals with anger and hate and all of those other kind of protective emotions. And your left hemisphere deals with joy, happiness, delight, that sort of stuff. The neuroscience of your emotions. Well, it comes through your autonomic nervous system, obviously. Your parasympathetic nervous system, remember, that's the rest and digest part of the body. This usually dominates your very pleasant emotions, right? Resting and digesting, if you feel that you can be in a state of rest, you're relaxed, right? And if you're relaxed, you're more open and you could be more pleasant at that time period. Sympathetic, this activates when startled, usually by a negative emotion. So this is the fight or flight response, right? This truly is whether or not you should run from the situation. I'm sorry this is cut off, but the neurotransmitters responsible here, we have epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, that's usually involved in fear. Norepinephrine usually comes around during anger. Serotonin, this is that either or. If you have a lot of serotonin, you're happy, right? If you don't have a lot, you can be depressed. It leads to sadness. And this last one's supposed to say steroids, roid rage. This is steroids can create false emotion within you, or they can enhance emotion that's there. So steroids can actually increase your aggression and lead to that roid rage. Here's just a really quick glance at a really simple table that I found that kind of shows the difference between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and the physiological responses as a result of those nervous systems. So pause this video and take a look at that. Just refresh your mind. All right, let's look at our theories. The James-Lange theory, we kind of already went over these in class, but this is really what you want to use to know these definitions, okay? So the James-Lange theory, this is your environment causes a physiological response, which then in turn causes emotion. These arrows will always mean cause. So emotion is caused by the physiological response. That is your key here. Something happens in the environment, it causes your physical response, right? The sweating, the increased heart rate, that sort of stuff. And then the emotion occurs after the physical response. The Kanan-Barr theory argues that emotion and body response happen simultaneously. One does not cause the other. Something in your environment does still cause your responses, but the emotional and the body responses happen at the same time. It's not as if the emotional can cause the body response or the body response can cause the emotional. So it is in direct opposition to James Lange, who says physical response, then emotional. Then finally we have the Schachter two-factor theory. And to help you remember this, you should probably like Schachter two-factor, you know, like you're a really great rap artist or something. I am absolutely not one, so I'm not going to go there. But Schachter two-factor, okay? Factor or two-factor Schachter, anything like that will help you remember this theory. This is saying that the environment or something internal can causes physical arousal, which then causes a conscious interpretation of that arousal. So we're adding something here. We're adding the analysis of our emotion. We're not just immediately, instantaneously, unknowingly reacting to our environment. We're interpreting our reactions. So, and this is important, and this is a great argument because some emotions feel very similar, right? Fear and sexual arousal have a lot of the same similar physical characteristics. In fear, your heart rate increases, right? You might also start sweating. When you experience physical attraction to another human being, your heart rate might increase. You might experience sweating. So the interpretation of your arousal is very important. It's something that the other two theories are lacking in their interpretation. So the Schachter two-factor theory has really made some big strides in the scene. All right, that is it for this video cast. Come back for the next one where we talk a little bit about expressing emotion. If I can